Yes, that works.
Okay, okay, okay. So on April 17th, 2020, Friday Night Chats brought to fruition after re-examining how the leadership construct, particularly organizational leadership, was defined. And since that day, FNC created a platform to broaden the scope of organizational leadership. So what is the role of organizational leadership across industries? How critical is data visualization to leadership? That's why I'm excited about Alston, because he's gonna share that with us. How does one identify or define, measure, analyze, and improve and control processes? And how does one lead dysfunctional teams? So over the last few weeks, we had just a plethora of subjects in terms of leadership in the law, um, nursing informatics, and during the COVID era, leading high performance teams. We had 8 strategies for a successful business model, emotional intelligence and wellness strategies, women in supply chain management or leaning into the pivot. So there have been many things, many topics that we have discussed over the last few weeks. So we are now encroaching the last 4 topics of discussion for Friday Night Chats until we start up again sometimes in the fall or early 2021. And tonight I am so excited to welcome Alston Reece. Now he's going to tell you about himself, share his background with you. But I have to tell you personally, the reason I am so excited about him being here is because I've always been concerned about not having that quantitative element within our organizational leadership program. When people see organizational finance or managerial econ, that's a little bit threatening for them. But he's going to bring it all together as he discussed leading global teams. So welcome, Alston.
Thank you. What I want to talk through, or I hope, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't be a good thing to
Well, that's
start with.
okay.
So again, what I like to do is I have a few slides more to set more for the conversation. Hopefully within the next couple of minutes, wherever the discussion goes, we'll talk a little bit about, leading global teams. So I have a few things just want to talk through. If there are questions that you have, I don't know what's the regular protocol, Dr. Love, they can raise their hand and we can go through, or at the end we can go through the question. But hopefully we can have a good discussion.
Okay.
If we go to the next slide, this is the part that, I mean, for those who know me well, I do not talk about much, but I'm going to give a little bit about the context of my background and the context of the discussion to see, how did I get here? So as you probably pick up by now, I try not to, or I try as much as I can to hide the accent, but I am Jamaican. I migrated to the United States. All my education is in the United States. So I did an associate degree in total quality management. I went home for a while. I was doing banking for quite some time. Then I came back and I did my bachelor's in economics and management information system. Worked a little bit in education, IT, and then I did graduate work. Now, I have experience over a few industries, and what I'm going to say today doesn't reflect necessarily my company's view, but what I just want to tell you is my personal view in terms of what I've seen over the years. So the sectors range or go across multiple, right? I've gone from construction to IT, power generation, pharma, and now I'm in medical devices. I work for Becton Dickinson, which is one of the largest manufacturer of medical devices. So who am I and what my job, not who am I, what my job is. So my job is I'm a global process owner. And this is more, I'd say, a more popular term that, or a more defined job career over the last 5 to 10 years. And what a global process owner or process owner does, they're responsible for the end-to-end process ownership. And what you do is you define the processes, you set the governance, and you implement technology or processes to make it work. So in the sense that in a lot of cases, I have in certain jobs, but the job I have right now, I do not have direct reports. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. So if we talk through, get to the next slide, Dr. Love.
Okay.
So I'd like to start. I mean, this is why we're here today in terms of leading global teams. So I've pulled up a couple of things just to talk within the context. Leader, they look at it and then it just pull a couple of definition. It says the person who leads or command a group, organization or country, and that's a regular Google search. Oxford learners say a person who leads a group or people, especially the head of a country or organization. Webster define a person who has commanding authority or influence. And then dictionary.com is a person or thing that leads. And my question is, I think I popped something off, but my question is, and I'd just like to do a little bit of poll, is how many really subscribe, and by raise of hands or yes or no, but how many subscribe to any of the definitions above that? Leadership is always seemed to be about authority.
I see Lillian raising her hand.
So, okay. So we can think through that. Anyone else has an opinion or a thought in terms of how they define? Is it always the same where leadership is seen or is viewed from a position of authority?
I see Jennifer shaking her head.
Is I shaking head as in no, I shaking head as in yes. Which one is it, Jennifer?
Oh, there's a balance?
It's a balance. Okay.
It depends. It depends.
Very good answer.
I've
So,
heard that management is the process of ensuring that people do the right things, and leadership is the process of ensuring that the right things are being done. I know it sounds like a play on words, but I think there is of course, there's a part of authority that's associated with it, but it's getting other people to follow your vision.
so yeah, that's true. And what I'm not here to do, there's a lot of books and a lot of specialists around that, but there's a difference between leaders and managers, right? Management is you're put in a position of authority. In my view, it doesn't mean that you're a good leader or you're a leader for that matter. And traditionally, a lot of organizations kind of look at it, someone has been skilled on their job, so they promote him to a manager, give him a team, and think they can lead. What you're going to find as we go through this, especially within this environment, right? And you'll see as we go through, within this environment, it's more than just you're my manager, right? And we'll go through and we'll talk about that. So just wanted to plant this as we go through is how many look at leadership from a definition of power. And a lot of people kind of get it. I like to go back to the Jamaican word, get it twisted. And because you're my manager, it means that you're a good leader. And I can share with you a couple of examples, and we'll go through it when we talk about leading global teams. I don't have direct reports. But if you think of it, I'm responsible for the global process within the stream that I own. I own the value stream I own is within vendor master, contracting, and sourcing. So I have to get, as we talk about, all the processes defined, all systems, etc. If we need to rebuild a system, implement the different systems, we have to get that done. And we also oversee all the transactional stuff that gets done. I don't have direct reports. How do you get it done? And when you look on the organization, right, I don't manage directly, but I have to get stuff done without them. And we'll talk about a few things that I've learned in terms of what work. But what we'll start our plant right now is, as it talks about lead and global team, it always comes from a position of trust, right? When you talk about getting stuff done, if you're you can always tell people to get stuff done. But when you get into a situation like we are in now, it's a different environment, right? And when you call or you reach out to someone and say, hey, we're in a situation, we have short supply, I need stuff done, are they going to pick up the phone and respond to you? And that's different. But the things that you're going to draw on later or in these times of crisis, you can't be building the relationship or building your leadership platform or building, to steal one of your words, Dr. Love, building your disciples when you're in crisis.
Yes.
You should have those disciples or those pros people that you can pull on, especially when you're leading a global team. Because right now, normally, for those who know, I'll be traveling I was scheduled to travel, for quite some time. I was going to be traveling from March until probably next year because of some projects we're leading. All of a sudden, we have to get the projects done, but I can't travel. Do we
Mhm.
stop? I don't have direct reports where I can say go do. How do I work with the organization to get them to, you know, redefine and make what I'm doing a priority for us to get work done? And you'll see as I go through here, it's about building those relationships and establishing credibility that you can pull on. It's not about popularity, it's about credibility, because you're going to find people in the organization you just don't get along, where we're all adults. You just have different opinion on things. That's fine.
Mhm.
But do they respect you, or have you built that professional network? Have you established that professional credibility that when you call them, they're not questioning what your ulterior motives are? And that is what I think is critical when it comes to, leading a global team, especially within the context of where we are. When I pick up the phone and I call someone and say, I have a problem, do they question my ulterior motive? Where is it going to go? What does he mean? What is he trying to do? What is he trying to get me? All that stuff is out the window. But when you pick up or someone else call you and say, Reece, I do have these issues I need you to solve. You don't have to go through all the norm informing, whatever the psychological thing you got to go through before you come to
You've
a
done that.
decision, but you're already there. So we'll talk about it a little bit as we go through. So if you can go to the next slide.
Sure. There you go.
So as we look through, and I think I start about it, and I can say what works for me, especially now I put lead in quotes because remember, I don't have direct reports, but I have to have influence over the organization to get stuff done. And a
Mhm.
lot of the projects that I work on are high visibility, high impact projects, but you have to get stuff done. So when I talk about leading, when I talk about teams, it's kind of virtual, or people that I work with are dotted line to me that I got to get stuff done through. So couple things that works, right? At least I'm talking about what works for me. The first order of business for a lot of folks, and for those who read a lot, they talk about the first order of business. But I just like to kind of put a spin to it and say sometimes the first order of business is not the business. The first order of business is if you really establish that relationship, what's going on? Reach out and feel for that people, especially now, right? We have riots going on, we have COVID going on, we have all of that. And imagine you have a meeting, you have someone there that's going through a lot of stuff. And the first thing you call him is, how is the project going? When are we going to get done? What's my report? What you think is going to happen after all of this is done? You might get the short-term win, but if we think a long-term, how do you do that? So that's why I mean sometimes the first order of business is not business. And what I try to do is before I have my official meeting or meet with everybody else, I call and have, your one-on-one check-in. How are you doing? How are things going? Is there something going on that I need to know about? How do we work through this? Those are the things you want to work with. And someone pick up, conduct the needs assessment. That's true. But within the context of what we're doing is just being personable. It doesn't necessarily mean, again, popularity or being liked. It's about showing that you care, right? And there's people that have life outside of the life. And if we think of and I know I'll get to it in a few slides, but if we think of the quote unquote new normal, normally, for example, I work from home a lot because I travel or I start meeting in Asia late at night, and I have European meetings early in the morning. So I go in the office, but I work a lot remote when I can. So, but normally before now, working remote was different. I drop my son off at school, everybody's there, and you're gone, right? Now working remote is you got to figure out what that daily plan needs to be, what his learning plan need to be. How do you take a break in between work and do it and get stuff done with your family or with with my son, in my case. Plus you got everybody remote now. So Asia is now working and they're calling you at night. You got Europe doing it at night. So it's just, how do you work through all of that? And think about it. people are actually going through more. So that's what I mean about the first order of business. Sometimes the first order of business is not business, and make sure that you build or you get those side conversation done before you get into the meeting, that you don't have too many meetings after the meeting. Does that make sense to everyone so far?
So when you said get the side conversations done, so you're establishing the trust
Yep.
prior to the meetings. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because if you go into the meeting, and you all know, I mean, you guys are all professionals. Sometimes you have people that they're in meetings, they just like to talk, to jockey,
Yeah.
right? Is they have a platform and just want to talk.
Yeah.
Get those done as much as you can before or after. Hey, I understand this is what we want to do. Let's have a separate conversation about that, right? And understand the individual members of the team. And that what I'm telling you is key for me when you talk about leading global team.
Mhm.
Across the world is different, and you can do days and weeks. You can have a course around cultural differences. But no matter what people tell you about everybody is the same, that is not true. There are variations. There's languages. There are cultural differences. There's things you need to be sensitive of. And we talk about the team is a group of individual. That's key. So what I mean by that is what I look on is when I'm working with a team is what are the strengths that different people have, right? And how do I pull on all those different strengths to get stuff done? Don't build yourself with a bunch of cheerleaders or a bunch of people that have the same skill. It doesn't work. You gotta build on different. I try to build myself or build the team or my indirect team to say, I have different folks that I gotta pull that I need for something. Okay, I need to get a communication quick out to leader people. I send it to one of my key persons and say, hey, I don't have a lot of time. Glimpse through this and see if it makes sense. I have to present something to leadership. I send it to someone. And in certain cases, I ping even my manager and say, hey, can you glimpse through this and say directionally if it makes sense? And once it directionally makes sense, then we start work through. Because one of the key pieces as you go through, and I talk about leading global teams, a lot of times when you're leading, you have to present up, right? You got to present to leadership. You got to let them know what you're doing. What I see that works a lot of time is old, I don't know if it was economics or Lean Six Sigma. I don't remember where within my I remember this, but it's called PGA, right? Same like PGA, but it's practical, graphical, analytical, right? For those that are very analytical, and I mean, I'm economics. I could talk stats from here till tomorrow, but honestly, leadership technically don't want to start with that. So practical, what does it mean to the bottom line, right? What does it mean to the bottom line? How are we going to work through? What's the impact, etc. Graphical, show me what it looks like, because they say a picture is worth 10,000 words or even more. That's true. People remember a picture in certain cases more than how they remember what you said. If you didn't see me, you probably wouldn't remember this speech tonight. So pictures are critical. And then analytical, right? You show them practical what it means. You show them, you talk to them practically. This is what it means to the bottom line. Graphical, you show them what it is. And then analytical, that's when you kind of get into the stats, right? We're going to move 5%. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to have this amount of loss for this year, but we're going to make up X amount. This is what it does for my ROI. And that's when they get interested. So it's PGA. And then the key piece is, as we work through when we say everyone needs to perform, you're going to, at least in my experience, right? If especially now when you're leading global teams, and in a lot of cases, we got all over the place, right? All over a different continent, everyone needs to perform. And if you have stragglers or people that are not performing, have those conversations, because in a lot of cases, what's going to happen is that they'll bring down the productivity of the team. So everyone needs to perform. I think we talked about it earlier, said understand the individual members of the team, but what are the individual strengths? And how do you pull on those strengths? And what it means is you pull on their strengths, but in most cases, you minimize the exposure. If someone don't like to do public speaking, don't give them, their first public speaking when they're presenting all in front of leadership. Because believe me, you might see it of it as a growth opportunity, but think about, as we talk about, when you reach out to that person, like in this time, Are they going to trust you to say, hey, I need you to present something for me? They're going to like, they're setting me up. Right? Because so think about, how do you minimize their exposure? Make sure they're working on it, but minimize their exposure. But within that, right, build that trust that where they're good at, you pull on that. Where they need some improvement on, you kind of work through that. And again, globally, it makes it even more critical. I think I talked about it earlier about be present. And being present doesn't necessarily mean it, it's not a Facebook or a social way of what I mean being present, right? Being present is, are you there in that conversation, right? Or are you're hearing, but you're not listening? Um, sometimes they do it. I think they do it called the Chinese telephone. Sometimes I don't know if you guys have done it throughout any of your career. You do Chinese telephone. You start with one thing. 13 people down the road, you ask the end person, what did I say?
Mm-hmm.
It's that and a little bit more. Sometimes people, oh, I'm listening, I'm hearing you, but they're on their phone, they're texting, they're just not present. And it's not a physical being there. It's just, are you present in the moment? Do you understand what's happening? Do you understand what's happening for that individual? Are you there to help work stuff through? And as I said, build trusted relationship. This is not popularity. I can share with you the examples that I said, and we'll talk about it when we get to the next slides. This is not a popularity contest, right? But trusted relationship, again, they might not like you. Them professionally, you just doesn't jive. You have different hobbies, you have different things, different whatever it is, but they trust you. And building a trusted relationship is, have you established that credibility that someone can call, or when you call that person, I think I've said this a million times and I see Jennifer nodding her head, when you call that person, they're not second guessing your ulterior motive. Because believe me, especially in these times when you need to get stuff done and get it done quickly, if someone is questioning your motives, it makes it a little, I'm being mild, but it makes it much more difficult to get stuff done. So, and it goes back to what we talked about. So if you look on what we're talking about, think about in my situation, I don't have direct reports, but I have to get stuff done. So how do you lead people that doesn't report to you, or motivate individuals that don't report to you to get your work done for you?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a game when you're not playing with folks, but it's one of the things, and I think people talk about it there, is about building that trust, working with that trust, and support them. One of my mottos that I've always had for my team, and anybody that works with me know this, if stuff goes well, I'm never the person presenting. I'm never the one talking about how good we are. I'm never the one talking about how our stats look well. If something goes wrong, that's when I come in. That's when I have the conversation, when stuff goes wrong. So if stuff is great, they take all the credit, they do all the presentation, they do everything. When it's bad news, it's my time. So that's one of the things that I do. And the next slide, we'll just kind of bring it home in the next few slides. I know we have a couple minutes. So I did talk about leading without direct reports, and just shared my example of that, getting things done through others. We talk about that a little bit. And one of the things I've found in my experience is leadership is not always about leading. And some individuals kind of get it mixed up, because I have to be the one there. I have to present. I have to speak. I have to do that. Leading is not about leading all the time. Leading is know when to step back and be a cheerleader. Leading know when to step back and be a servant. Leading is know when to step back and let the person take the limelight, and you're just there in the background doing it. And I think I joke, one of my C-suite, my CIO, he talks about leading and being that, what you call it, the conductor or the orchestra, right? You're just there helping people to get stuff done. It's not about you. It's not about me when it's leading global team. It's never about me. If the team doesn't perform, guess what? It's not going to work. So for me, just not, leaders is not always about leading, and we can take a whole presentation kind of talk about that, but it's knowing when to, I think there's a old song to kind of date my age, know when to hold him, know when to fold him, know when to walk away, know when to run. Yes, you guys are laughing at me.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. so, so it's about that. And sometimes, because I've been in situation, I share a personal example. I traveled, and for those who know me, so I travel a few times, and in certain cases, I go certain places, and they like have my staff or my direct report, and they go to my direct report and say, "How are you doing, Mr. This?" And treating them like the manager, and they look and they're like, "It's him," and they're like, "Oh, but you don't, you didn't announce yourself of whatever." I'm like, if I have to announce myself all the time, then guess what? I'm not being effective in what I do. So again, know when to hold him, know when to fold him. Don't ask me to sing, but I just remember a few pieces of that, right? um, and then the things we talk about is know when to have someone else lead, right? Because we talk about leading global teams. I work with a lot of different cultures, a lot of different countries, but in certain cultures, just the way it is, just because of the way they operate, sometimes you just basically work through someone else to get stuff done, right? And if you want to have conversation, you work with someone else and they'll go and they talk through it, because in certain cases it's very formal. It's about building that trust we talk about. And their version of trust is I can't know in a year or two and you're asking me to do stuff, right? So you work with someone that has worked with them for years and have them work it through. And it's not about giving up power, or it's not about I'm not being a leader. It's about getting stuff done. And it goes back to what we said, know when to do what. Do not take yourself too seriously. And I'll be the first to tell people, when you're leading a global team, don't try to think you know everything. I never try to think I know everything, because I joke and I say to them, if I need to know everything, guess what? I don't need everybody else. And guess what? I'll never know everything. So it's not going to work. So it goes back to what I talked earlier in terms of building your team. Do not define yourself or your organization into a box. And what do I mean by that? A lot of times people kind of talk about, for example, I think I put it here is I'm a five-star restaurant, and this is a loose example. And my definition of fine dining is to have someone sit in and have the ambience and the wine and all that. My question is, how is that working for you in a time of COVID?
Mm.
Is fine dining a place or an experience? So if you define yourself fine dining as an experience, you can cook good food and send it to their home and they can have a fine dining experience. So that's what I use as an example, is don't define yourself into a box that actually your definition make you irrelevant or make your team irrelevant when things change, when situations change. And people talk about strategy and all that. Strategy is a temporary event. You can't be working on strategy, and I say that as leading a global team. You can't be working on your strategy 24/7. You set your strategy, you adjust your strategy as you're going through, but roll up your sleeve, especially in these times, what I find, and get dirty. If I need to post stats, if I need to do a presentation, if my staff need to put a presentation, I pull the presentation together, send it to them and say, tell me what you think, fix it up, go present it. And my manager do the same thing for me. So as we work through that, is just people get too tied up in, oh, I'm working on strategy and I'm always working on strategy. Okay, but what is your long-term goal? What is your long-term plan? And for those who are kind of into chess versus checkers, you probably understand what I'm saying here. Don't be playing checkers when you should be playing chess. There are short-term moves that you need to do in leading a global team, but most of what you do should be tied to what you're planning to do long-term, right? What's your 5, what's your 10-year, and even certain cases, what's 15 years. Certain cultures, their long-term is 100 to 300 years. So how do you kind of do that? So that's what I mean by chess versus checkers, right? There's different moves they need to take, and there's certain moves you got to make where you're saying you're sacrificing short-term gains for the long-term goal. And that's one of the things that we got to do when you're leading a global team. There are certain times when your team will not perform. That is okay. But are you building the team that they can be better in the next project? But don't try to win everything. You'll get exhausted. It's just how do we work between the chess and the checkers. And then the other slide.
Okay.
So this is, I think I've talked about it a little bit. So I think all of us, our reality has changed over the last, well, because, you know, you work internationally, you kind of know, it started a while back with my Asia folks. We start working through that. So there was some awareness about, you know, it coming. But as we know it today, for most of the COVID, I would say, situation start in the United States in March. And I think I started talking about earlier is that projects need to be delivered, but in certain cases they have to be accelerated because COVID sometimes mean that, hey, if you have manual processes, how do you automate those, right? If you have some controls that heavily manual, how do you automate those? So some of those projects you need to automate or to put controls has to be accelerated. There's travel restriction, there's 100% remote, we have virtual go lives, and we talk about that work-life balance, right? You have teams that have, you know, their kids at home or their family at home or caring for older folks that they have to deal with now as a full-time along with working full-time. So all that working. So I see what works for me in terms of, you know, leading or influencing, I put it that way, influencing a global team to get stuff done for me is around flexibility and awareness of what is the socio and macro economic conditions. I'm not here to talk about politics, but be aware. Um, there's riots going on. There's COVID going on. Don't blind your eyes to all that situation that's happening and ignore the socio macro conditions. Again, not talking about politics. I'm just talking about awareness. I talked about the strategy all the while. Is just adjust your strategy, right? If you had set your strategy well enough, in a lot of cases, it will survive the ups and downs. But if you have these type of situation that's game changer, you might have to tweak it a little bit. And we talked about pulling on that relationship that we have built trust, right? Who are the team or the people or the members of your team or people you can call and they don't question it, right? It's not blind loyalty, but they trust you in terms of what you're asking that they'll execute and then you can talk about it later. And it's the same way, right? Do you have people that will call you and say, I need these? And I've had situation now, as I said, let me get to the next point, but position of power does not equate to mean C or V in your job title. And this is what I'm telling my example. So you don't have to be a CIO, a CEO, or C, all the C-suite, or a VP of this or a VP of that. Position of power is not always equate to the title. Position of power is more around how do you get stuff done? Can you influence and do you build on that trust? I've had situation and I can tell you where we need stuff from major suppliers and the C-suites or the VP, they reach out and say, Reece, who can you reach out to get this done? This is critical for us. The supply chain is out. Who can we reach out to get this done? I'm not a title person, but I just go to say that, right? That's a CEO or a VP. Normally in the tradition, you know, VP call VP and they go to the organization. But when they go to you, I can go directly to the person that know what's going on. And then they will say, okay, we have this, we can get you there. Here's what you need to do to get it. I said have network that you can reach into that have channels within the organization. So for me, as I talk about leading global team, ensure that your team build that network also, right? Because you need to reach out to your team member that can reach out to others, can help stuff done. And this is, you know, I'm not talking, I know Dr. Love will talk about social and psychology and all the other stuff, but they can let you be aware of all the undercurrents, good or bad, that's going on that can help you be more successful. So ensure that your team is building that network and building that trust out, that basically they trust your team and they trust you as the, I'd say the cheerleader, I'm leader of that team. It's all about the process, right? If you have something and you say you know it, my first thing is I'm going to ask you, show me your process. Show me your process map. Where is it documented? How is it done? It's all about the process. And then get your hands dirty. I think I talked about it there. Some leaders, and I find that that works for me, is, oh, I'm this title, or I can't do that. Get your hands dirty. If you need to pull a report, if you need to go do stuff to help the team be effective, do it. It helps build trust. Have a balanced team. I think I talked about it. Diverse and different skills. And I kind of would just like to throw this out or close with this. And it's more meant to kind of brain, you know, to think through than an actual event. But what I say, do not be the leader on the Titanic that you're arranging cheers when the ship is going down. at that time, it doesn't matter, right? You're sinking anyway. So what we're saying is, so should you be arranging the chairs, or should you be up there on the top of the deck trying to get live vote or live vest for people to have them come off? And I think that was my last slide, and I hope that kind of triggers some question that we can have more conversations.
Absolutely. Well, there was a lot in that presentation. I really appreciate your knowledge and your depth of knowledge of Reece. And I know that this group here has questions, and I'm going to let them start off with the questions, and I'm going to end with some questions. So I'm going to leave the floor open. I can either type the questions in, or you can type the questions and he can see them, or you can just speak the questions out to him now. Let's see, the floor is open. Oh.
Hi, it's Kim. That was a very, very good presentation. You started out talking about kind of like how leadership is not authoritative, or questioning us about whether we see leadership as authoritative. What are some of the key qualities that you think in a project manager or a position where you have to help people pull together strategies? You don't necessarily have someone directly reporting to you. What type of key leadership skills would you say would be advantageous for someone to have?
So before I get to that one, I'd just like to kind of talk about the basic. And there are certain things is do what you say you're going to do and the time you say you're going to need it. And then the second thing, as we talk about leadership skills or leadership traits, is be flexible. Because, and probably this is not the best way to say it, but make yourself approachable, right? And a lot of times you have individuals that are very good, and it's not a look or it's not a face, but trust. This is what I'll say. I mean, just kind of put it this way.
Processing.
Yeah, I'm processing, because that's a very good question, and there's a lot of ways to answer it. But this is where I'll put it is, one, ensure that you do the homework, right? So as a leader, make sure you know what you're talking about. So I know it's probably not in a book, or probably don't have the right definition now to put it, but ensure that you're knowledgeable about your topic. It doesn't mean that you know every single aspect of it, but ensure that at least you know to ask the high level or the second level questions. The second thing, and I think they talk about situational leadership, but it's be aware, right? And that's one of the things that I see work is be aware. And you might go into a presentation, if we kind of use this tonight, right? I might come, ready and do certain things, but it changed. How do you adjust? Does the environment or the situation make you not being able to perform? So I think it's about that situation awareness. Know your stuff, right? Know your stuff. A lot of people tend to use fancy presentation to hide ignorance. Know what you're talking about. Spend the time to do the homework, because believe me, after a couple questions, it will show if you know what you're doing. That kind of, I know that there's a longer way to answer that, but did that kind of give a little bit of guidance?
Yeah, that was really, really good. And I do like the way that you kind of preface that leaders are adaptable, especially like you said, you work with people in different countries, and when the culture is different, you do have to adapt. You can't just expect everybody to adapt to your culture and the way that you do business. You do have to make concessions for other people's culture and the way that they conduct business. So excellent presentation.
And one of the things I'd like to caution us all is, and just being honest with you guys, don't be that, I put it in quote, but don't be that obvious American. And what I mean by this is, I was going to use another word, don't be that stupid American. But here's what I mean by that. Sometimes when people work in the global environment is they tend to only look at the world through the eyes of the USA. There's a lot of world outside the US. Mm-hmm. So you might be from here, and I said I didn't born here, but I'm a citizen here, but kind of understand how it looks from the eyes of others. I give you a simple example, a very simple example, but how many people have gotten a prescription that take once a day? Just quickly raise your hand. Once a day, right? If I was in Latin America and I get ONCE, you know what that means? Take 11 times a day. That's once.
Once, yes.
So it's just a simple example in terms of sometimes we gotta not be that I said that obvious American, but look through the global lens where you can.
Well, when American has established a business language, there's a pretext that we established a framework for doing business. And so when we look to do business internationally, we have this template that we want to set in other countries, and it has not worked at all. And so we have to step back and understand that there's a cultural awareness. And so we have to, as you said, look, through the lens of other cultures so that we can effectively develop those relationships, because there is a huge trust factor there. As soon as you have that term American, your target is just like a target on your head. Here they come,
Yeah.
The knowledge, the
yeah.
subject matter experts, and they know it all, but we have to be aware and do things differently, and that should be okay.
Yeah.
It should be okay. Absolutely. And thank you for soft pedaling those words.
I was trying there. Any other questions or stuff you guys want to talk about?
Well, I just wanted to ask you a question in terms of Six Sigma. Now, is that certification, is that a global certification?
Yes.
Okay, it is a global, so there are standards that are set up. So when you're doing business with other countries, that's the standards that's set internationally. Is that the expectation?
Yeah, so there are, so I'm both PM and Lean Six Sigma certified. So I think one of the things that allows to have that conversation is you can ask, okay, if you're Lean Six Sigma or if you're Lean or if you're Black Belt, because there's certain criteria that you have to meet to do that. So what it allows you to do is kind of have that conversation across when I can talk about standard deviation or what's your norm, or we can have that conversation knowing that you need to have a base framework around that. It's similar to being PMP certified. So when you start talking about agile or you start talking about that language, it's a global language that needed, and it set that framework for that conversation. Now, there's a difference between the language and all that about the practicality of getting stuff done, right? You establish the language, etc. You make sure that you know the base and how you're going to talk, but there might be a different undercurrent in terms of how to get stuff done, right? Because one of the things we always talk about is, do you want to sit there and plan about what you're going to do and never get it done? Or do you want to get what you get done and then show us the methodology of how you got it done? And that's some of the dilemma that people have. And which one are you? Do you want to get it done and show you get it done, or you just want to sit there and plan, and your timelines get extended and you just don't get stuff done? So when is planning enough? When you use these skills enough, Lean Six Sigma or PM, to set that framework that you can start executing?
Is there a cultural component factored into your definition of success or performance in dealing with international corporations?
I would say, I always look on the success about, and this is how I always look at it, right? To kind of help mitigate some of the cultural biases, and we all have biases, but at least in the beginning, set what success looks like, or define what success is for that project or that activity that you're leading. Once you define what success is or are, depends on if it's plural, then you measure to that. So it kind of take out the biases out of it, because I might look at it and someone did their work and you're saying, oh, they did great. And in my culture, I'm like, you did your job. That's what you were hired to do your job. Should I give you a medal for doing your job? But then again, that's probably the Jamaican in me. So that's what I'm saying is just, how do you define those things at the beginning that people know what they're performing to? What's exceed, what's met, what's a great job, what's is below par, and you got to get that done. So you kind of mitigate some of that bias that that we all have.
And those standards are preset, so everyone comes to the table to establish and define the metrics for performance and success. Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
So we're gonna, you say, okay, we're gonna move. Our our goal is we're gonna improve this number by 10%.
Okay.
And 15% means, between 10 to 15% is good, 20% is above par, 30% is exceed. You kind of get that level set, and then you don't have to worry about that in the end.
Okay. Another question is, could you discuss a challenging project and how you managed it?
Which one?
I know you, so it led to this success anyway, but just talk about that project.
No, I mean, I can tell you I've had projects that fail. And sometimes success, and I put it in quote, the definition of success is not necessarily always that stuff goes well.
Okay.
And here's what this means. I've had projects in my career, won't tell you which one of the jobs, where we defined, the same thing we talked about. We defined the measures of success. We define timeline. We define everything else. But then leadership, I put it in quote, came in and say, I need to get it done in X time. You got no resources, you get X, Y, D, this is what I need to get done. Now, when we evaluated the risk and we kind of told them, hey, probably this is not a good idea, then they said they needed to get it done. And guess what? It failed. But what we did is document.
Okay.
Here was our timeline. Here was the resource need. These were the deliverables at this point. Here's now the new deliverables. Here are the new timeline. And here's what the expectations are. And you clearly outline there's a gap and it needs to be met by, because it's either time, it's quality resource or time. It's a trade-off. You can't get all three. So they don't want to trade off on anything. So guess what that means? It's a failure. You don't want to address on time. You don't want to adjust on the quality of the delivery in terms of we're going to start reducing scope or working through that, right? And you don't want to give me more money. So that's a recipe for disaster. So guess what? Document it, and then you have that conversation. Was it a hit on me? Yes. But again, when stuff goes bad, it's all me. But then I go through and say, here's what our original plan. Here's what we told her that we need to be successful. We didn't get it. So guess what's going to happen? And it's just document.
It's documented. Okay. What's would you describe an idea project for you? Like, what's the idea project for you? The perfect project. What are some of the factors?
I think the factors for me in terms of what would be into a perfect project or something that, I enjoy doing is I don't want to know the answers, or it shouldn't be easy for me. It has to be something that pull upon some that I don't know, but at least I have high level understanding of what I'm going to do. And here's that mean. I don't want to go do a project for a simple example, right? I don't want to do a project, for example, to say, okay, let's define a process. Let's do a process map. We've done it a million times, right? But how do we get into those projects that it's areas I don't know, and I have to go through the thought process to go through what we talked about. Where am I? Where do I need to be? How do I get there? Right? Where am I today? I don't know anything about this project. Where I need to be, these are the deliverables that I need to get done in X time. How do I get there? That's the old journey in terms of how we get there. And a lot of, folks talk about, it's a journey. And the journey is the learning. The results is just a part of that journey that you do through. And for me, it's just, if I can get, those projects are what attract me all the time. And I've, within my job and what I do as a process owner across different hemispheres is I've always had the opportunity to change companies within certain time, because you go, you set it up, get them running right, and then you move somewhere else. My skill is not, you know, going through the same stuff and redoing the same thing after I established the process, but going into that chaos, getting it organized, setting the infrastructure, building the organization, then hand it off. Can I run it for a little bit? Yes. But those are the things that, you know, attract me in terms of building.
Good, good. Other questions? Annette? Do you have any questions? Carla, Jennifer?
I'll mute myself here a minute.
Okay.
Excellent presentation. I got in on the tail end there, unfortunately, because I had a, I came a little bit late. I had a call right when the session started. But from what I gleaned, it was excellent information. So enjoyed it. I didn't get to hear your history of, you know, I picked up that you're from Jamaica. So your background. So very well done.
Thank you.
Good, good, excellent. Jennifer. So it's like being in class, right?
So,
I'm gonna
right. So obviously you're excited about being a project manager.
Yeah.
There's pure excitement, and I appreciate that. It's a hard job, and it's hard getting people to join in on your excitement about getting that process done. And you're showing it right now. And I appreciate that. It makes
the thing I'll add though is just I'm a process owner and projects is part of that portfolio. I get that. So I'm responsible, as you said, within the space for all the process and projects or whatever you need to get done within the space to work through. And the good thing about it, and I said, I've been fortunate enough in my career so far, and I've had one of the things that have worked for me is jump into that area that I don't know. I don't know if I've shared with the team initially, but when I finished graduate work, I was in supply chain for a while. One of my friends called me and say, hey, this company is setting up an organization, and what we're going to be is almost internal consultants to the organization. And when I look at the manager and I'm like, why are you hiring me? He's like, you have a degree in economics. I'm like, I don't practice economics. He's like, that's fine. And they build that group. So it's always gravitating to those where I don't know the answer, but at least I'll figure it out as I go. I know what the end state is and kind of work our way through. And in a lot of cases, what I'll find is sometimes individuals get too tied up in terms of how are we going to get to the results? You know what I mean? The how versus what we need to get done. And what I've found within, you know, executing projects with this part of the portfolio is yes, sometimes the how is critical, right? Because you don't want to get a project done, but you've created so much fires behind you that nobody wants to work with you for the rest of your career. That's done, but sometimes leave a little flexibility. Right? They do it differently, but it gets done.
So it sounds like, so if I'm understanding correctly, and sorry because I joined a little bit late, so you fell into project management, it kind of sounds like.
No, I've always, the weird thing is, and again, this is where I think it's kind of funny when you try to explain to people as a part of their job. So if I kind of walk through, so I've always had to do projects throughout my career.
Right.
One of the things for me that I always look on is getting credibility within the space you are. So one of the things I did is went and get certified as a project manager.
Okay, so you did the PMP. Okay, you did the PMP just so that you could walk in as the kind of the authority.
Yeah. But I've always had to do project throughout my career. As I talk about, you go into stuff, you assess, you need to get work done, it becomes a project. And, you know, we can always talk about project versus a task. And then I've always been, I like Lean Six Sigma, I love statistics and all that. And it's just something that as part of the requirement that I had for one of the jobs that I had in one of my jobs I had previously is you had to be black belt certified within X amount of time. So again, it's like gravitating to those that stretch you and get you the things that you need to do, and getting the credentials where possible, or getting the certifications where possible to lend that credential. That someone, you go into a room, someone is not questioning, oh, what do you know about project management?
Right.
Yes, you know, you have the title and you have to demonstrate it, but I hope that kind of helped explain it. It's just getting, I always have to do it. I want to get the credentials to add to the credibility of who I am as a person delivering for that.
Good. Good.
And I don't talk about this. It's just when people kind of start talking crazy, I'm like, what are you talking about? There's no such thing.
And you do it with a smile on your face, always.
Yeah.
Lillian, do you have a question?
Well, I was trying to understand how long did it take for you to gain your Lean Six Sigma black belt, and is the process really hard? Because it seemed kind of taboo when I last looked at it in a professional manner.
So I think in certain cases, it has been used not for really the context of what Lean Six Sigma is, right? So it took me about a year or 18 months to get it done. And as part of the certification, you have to complete X amount of project. You have to do assessment. It's a lot of work. Now, there's a difference between practicing and actually go through the certification for Lean Six Sigma versus there's a lot of schools that's now certifying or stamping, you get Lean Six Sigma. I would say, and I'd say to one of to others, I'm one of the old school people. You had to go through, you had to demonstrate, you had to do your projects, you have to demonstrate the skill, you have to go through all of that. You have to do an assessment on the skills before you're certified. And I got certified through my company. But yes, I'd agree with you. In certain cases, it has been, there's different feel and there's different opinions around there. And, it's one of those things. It's like everything else. It's knowing, as things become popular, people gravitate towards it. And in certain cases, the value might be diminished. So we just got to, how to manage through that.
So were you recommended for the program, or did you have to seek out assistance to join the Lean Six?
No, as part of my job, as I was telling you, when I took, so I was with one particular company, and then, as I said, they were forming this team. At the time, it was called Supply Chain Excellence, and we'd be like internal consultants to. So we're that group that, if we have supply chain issues, or if we will go to the supplier, and we could look at everything at the supplier, from relaying out their manufacturing floor to remapping their process, have the conversation about staffing. You can actually help, as we were in charge of suppliers that we want to keep and do business with. We build them up to the standard that we want to do business with us. As part of that job, you had to be certified in Lean Six Sigma within a certain amount of time. Because as you see, your skill set needs to cover a wide span, right? And you need to know the difference between when to do, 5S, when to do Lean versus when to do Six Sigma, right? When to just basically clean up the processes versus when you're going to take statistics to look on variation, and how do you reduce those variation? How do you drive those efficiencies? So as part of that job, is you had to be certified within a certain amount of time. I took that job after I got my Lean Six Sigma certification. Then I'm like, okay, let me just do my PMP certification. And then I did it within the same company. So I was fortunate enough that they paid for all of it, and I was able to get the credentials through that.
Do you have to be sponsored by a corporation or a university?
In my instance, where in my company that I was at, yes, you had to be a part of that group, because it's not cheap. The way they do it is not cheap. So both from the PMP and for the Lean Six Sigma, yes, they sponsored. Because our group, as I said, that was her job. So yeah, they sponsored us to do that. Now I think it's even different. There's schools you can go to get those certifications, and you don't need to be sponsored.
Absolutely. Carla?
Hello, I'm sorry, I had a lot of background noise.
That's okay.
I really appreciate the presentation. What you were talking about reminds me of the course the global leadership class I took a little while back. So it's tying directly into your experiences and the things that you were talking about as far as what you need, and as far as how you have to know your global team, and how different countries they experience things differently most times, and you have to, and you know, you'll know that, let's see, as far as like somebody from China, you know, there are certain ways of doing things as far as working in a team. So you have to make that relative to what you're trying to do as far in your situation to make that work. And you can't, like you said, as far as us being American, how sometimes we kind of like bulldoze and it's all about us and what we want to do. But you know, in that culture, you have to be more thoughtful and things like that as far as what you need and how you're supposed to get the end result that you want. So I appreciate that.
Not a problem.
Good.
When I say us being American, you guys understand what I mean, so that's a good thing. It's not. I'm not gonna.
We're not going to take your card away from you.
I'm a citizen now. I don't have a card anymore.
We don't assault that easily. No, we're good.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. Yeah. Well, Reece, honestly, this has been an incredible presentation and time spent on Friday Night Chats. You answered the question, how do we respond to the social event of this time? And incredible, incredible information and how it all ties into leadership. And I love how you position leadership. It doesn't have to come from that position of power, focusing on processes. And so I was thinking, whether it's a church or a nonprofit organization or a corporation, right now with technology is leading. You don't know who's behind that wheel and who's doing all the navigation, but they are leading in certain aspects. And so I really appreciate that position that you've taken with leadership. Incredible presentation, incredible. So I thank you. And so I want to just close out this team of students that has joined us, and Annette has joined us, and we had some of the, I call the so-called F&C faculty has joined as well. Every week there has been a level of expertise, and that's, we're all grabbing it and all learning together about the possibilities. You know, how do you apply leadership? And it's not one congealed construct, right? It's very, very fluid. So I appreciate that. And so for the team that's here now, I just want to listen and I just want to tell you, and Reece as well, is that we have 3 more sessions and then it will end. And so next week, we're going to talk about intergenerational leadership. So leading in the intergenerational culture, and we're going to focus on the Gen Zs. So young lady, yes, she's going to tell us all about leading in the intergenerational culture. So please come back next week. And again, thank you once again, Reece. Excellent presentation. You know, I'm kind of biased, but that's okay.
Not a problem. I'll find out more later, right? When the chew, I didn't like what he said. We'll find out.
No. But I have some notes in the chat room, and I will also, if it's okay with Reece, I will also display it on YouTube as well. So, okay.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your night,
Bye.
and we'll send any questions Dr. Love way, and she'll find a way to reach me to answer it.
Well, amen to that.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I know. Jennifer, I'm trying to figure out how to get out of here. I'm always the last one. There you go. I'm still on. That was good. You did such a good job. Here we go.